Last summer, I transformed a forgotten swamp into a crystal blue private lake behind my estate, dredging its depths and planting lilies until it gleamed like a gemstone hidden from prying eyes. I never dipped a toe in its waters, not because of fear, but because I knew its purity came at a price. The heavy minerals and untouched sediment created a toxic brew beneath the surface. Every sign I posted warned, no swimming, water impure. Every letter I wrote to the HOA insisted they respect my boundary and safety rules, yet they ignored every caution as if drowning in stubbornness were their destiny. Welcome to Prodigy Tales. Make sure you like and subscribe for your top-notch HOA drama. Despite the glaring warnings, the HOA board convened at my backyard pavilion, murmuring about shared amenities and community spirit. Karen, in her signature neon swimsuit and oversized visor, flounced to the lake's edge with defiant smiles, urging her colleagues to join. They said it was just a dip, a harmless gesture to assert dominion over shared grounds. I watched through binoculars on my balcony as they stripped down, ignored the rotting reeds at the shore, and dove in unceremoniously. Their laughter echoed across the waterline, a mocking chorus that stirred the foul currents below. I'd performed multiple water tests and forwarded toxicology reports to the HOA secretary, but each memo vanished into the abyss of committee archives. Undeterred, Karen hosted impromptu swim recitals, complete with floating drink bars and disco lights tethered to paddle boards. Other board members uploaded selfies mid-lap and tagged them lake life, blissfully unaware the slow-acting contaminants were seeping into their pores. By day's end, Karen's triumphant shriek upon resurfacing echoed around the villa like a victory cry. If only she knew the true nature of her triumph. 3 days later, the rupture began. Karen woke up with crimson welts stamping her skin, fevers spiking hotter than midsummer pavement. At the HOA meeting, half the board sported red-rimmed eyes and complained of skin peeling like bad wallpaper. They blamed my lake as though I'd invited them to a toxic baptism. Chairs squeaked. Voices clashed in a cacophony of outrage and self-pity. I sat at the back, arms crossed, savoring every moment of their self-inflicted misery. Their doctor reports cited rare parasites and chemical burns traced directly to pond water ingestion and immersion. The irony dripped like acid. I calmly slid onto the dash and adjusted my pristine suit, my smile as sharp as surgical steel. I reminded them of every cautionary email threaded with lab results, every posted sign, and every certified letter sent to the HOA office. When I unfurled the stack of acknowledgments, signed, dated, and stamped, they couldn't retreat behind claims of ignorance. Karen's lips trembled upon seeing her own signature. The board chairman stuttered apologies. A camera crew from the local news captured their public confession at that instant. Faces registered horror as the truth sank in. They had willfully poisoned themselves, all while pointing fingers at the only person who foresaw the disaster. As the room descended into chaos, I collected the last shred of their disbelieving stares and filed it away like precious evidence. Whispers of restitution began circulating among the board members, each grappling with realization that their arrogance had been their undoing. Yet in that moment of triumph, I sensed the battle was far from over. The ripples of today's spectacle would echo through the neighborhood, igniting alliances, vendettas, and betrayals. Little did Karen know, her plunge into my forbidden waters was just the opening act of the drama I would unleash soon. The HOA board's skin may have been flaking, but their entitlement peeled off even faster. You'd think after breaking out in rashes and being publicly humiliated by their own signatures, they'd stay away from my lake like it was radioactive. But no, Karen doubled down. She held a community forum in front of the lake like it was her stage. Wrapped in bandages and smelling like vapor rub, she stood before her folding chair army and claimed I weaponized nature against her. Her followers nodded like cult members, patches on their arms, coughs in their throats, but loyalty blinding their brains. Karen's new plan? Rebrand the infection. She said my lake was a healing challenge that only affected people who weren't pure of intention. I wish I was joking. She brought out crystals, hired some TikTok spiritualist named Celestia Moonfire, and invited the HOA to cleanse themselves again, this time with chanting and essential oils. I had to reread my warning signs just to make sure they didn't accidentally say free spa. And wouldn't you believe it, they swam again. I recorded it all, every minute. Drone footage, motion-triggered cameras, night vision trail cams, and even a hidden GoPro strapped to the back of my dog. Karen flailed in the water like she was summoning Poseidon, while two board members set up incense on paddleboards that kept tipping over. One guy got bit by a fish, another lost a toenail. It was like watching a bunch of toddlers reenact Survivor Suburban Delusion Edition. But here's where it really spirals. After their second swim, things got worse. Vomiting, hair loss. Some developed boils that looked like cursed popcorn. Karen showed up to the next HOA meeting wearing gloves and a scarf in 90-degree heat. She still blamed me, of course, and said I magically cursed the lake. Her logic had gone full cartoon villain, so they decided to confront me. A group of them marched up to my gate, banging on it like villagers with pitchforks. Karen screamed through the intercom, demanding I decontaminate my own lake or face legal action. I calmly buzzed them in, offered them lemonade, then pulled out a manila folder labeled Dumb Decisions Volume 2. Inside, timestamps, signed waivers, even footage of Karen herself reading my warning signs out loud before cannonballing it anyway. She went pale, or paler, under all that aloe vera. Then came the twist. The HOA board passed an emergency vote, without me, naturally, trying to seize my lake under neighborhood safety jurisdiction. Yep, they wanted to steal the very thing they almost dissolved their own skin in. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my imported espresso. But I didn't panic. I played it calm, collected, dangerous, because if they wanted war, I was going nuclear. I called up my environmental lawyer, then my real estate lawyer, then my videographer. I planned something so devastating, so public, so perfectly humiliating, it would leave the HOA board, and especially Karen, begging for mercy. They thought they could rewrite property laws and gaslight their way into owning something they couldn't even understand. But I had something they didn't. Proof. Patience. And a vindictive streak a mile wide. Now the trap was set, and they were already halfway in the jaws of it, smiling for the camera. I knew Karen couldn't help herself. The infection had barely left her system, and yet she strutted around the neighborhood like she was leading a crusade. Her bandages were now color-coordinated, her voice raspy from shouting about eco-abuse. The HOA board became her foot soldiers, scratching their rashes while nodding to her every word like she was Joan of Arc with a chlorine allergy. That's when the snooping began. She started with binoculars. Subtle, but classic. Perched behind her hibiscus bushes, peering into my property like she was starring in her own low-budget spy thriller. She'd whisper into a walkie-talkie, which I'm pretty sure wasn't connected to anything but her own self-importance. The funniest part? My lake wasn't even visible from her house. She literally climbed onto her kid's trampoline to get a better view. Then came the drones. Tiny buzzing pests zipping over my lawn like futuristic mosquitoes. One even hovered outside my upstairs window while I was brushing my teeth. I stared at it, toothbrush midair, and it hovered right back like it was challenging me to blink first. I didn't. I grabbed my salt gun and blasted it right out of the sky. That was drone number 3. The first two, one crash landed into my grill. The other got snatched by a hawk. But the invasion didn't stop there. Karen hired a self-proclaimed toxic property investigator who turned out to be a guy named Doug with a fake badge and a mullet. Doug trespassed onto my land at 3 a.m. with a pool skimmer and a jar. Security caught him trying to bottle the lake water while mumbling about chemical sabotage. I let him go with a warning, but I kept the jar. And then, because Karen's snoop meter was broken, she started questioning my delivery drivers, asking what I ordered, where it was from, whether I had black market algae samples inside my Amazon boxes. I ordered a new garden hose one day. The next morning, she accused me of setting up a chemical dispersal system around the lake. The whole neighborhood turned into a circus. Karen printed flyers, "Toxic Lake Cover-Up, Stop Him Before It's Too Late." She slipped them into mailboxes, taped them to dog poop bins, even stuck one to my car windshield. In bold red font, she claimed I was intentionally cultivating an infectious biohazard for personal amusement. Now, normally I'd ignore someone unraveling like that, but she made one fatal mistake. She claimed my lake was directly harming the children. No, that was the line. Suddenly, I wasn't just the private lake owner anymore. I was the neighborhood's villain. Parents started pulling their kids away from my sidewalk. Someone poured detergent on my lawn. A rotten tomato hit my garage door. all while Karen smiled from her porch like a queen watching her kingdom turn against the outsider. But what they didn't know, what Karen never realized, is that I don't play defense. I had footage, I had files, I had a full timeline. I had a team of lawyers quietly compiling every instance of trespassing, defamation, and drone harassment. And now, after everything, I finally had motive. Still, I waited. Because Karen wasn't done. She had one more move to play. The big one, and oh, when she played it. She really thought she had me. It was a Saturday morning when the flashing lights came down the street. 4 black SUVs, sirens off, tinted windows, and a dozen federal agents stepped out like they were filming an episode of Narcos Suburbia Edition. Birds stopped chirping. Sprinklers shut off. Even the neighborhood Karenites froze mid-dog walk as the feds marched right to my gate. And who stood across the street, arms folded with a smug little smirk under her sun hat? Karen. Wrapped in gauze like a mummy, barely hiding the glee in her red-rimmed eyes. She actually waved as I opened the door. The lead agent flashed his badge. "Mr. Lane? That's me," I said, already sipping coffee like this was just another Tuesday. "We've received multiple complaints regarding a potential environmental hazard and suspected biowarfare linked to your private lake. May we speak inside?" I stepped aside and let them in, casually tossing a glance at Karen, who was already pulling out her phone to record. The HOA peanut gallery was gathered on her lawn like it was movie night. One dude brought a folding chair and trail mix. Inside, I walked them through the house. Immaculate, cameras everywhere, legal docs stacked neatly beside the TV, and then out back to the lake. "Gentlemen," I said, gesturing like I was unveiling a masterpiece. The alleged weapon of mass infection. They circled the shore like sharks. One guy dipped a stick in the water, another jotted down notes. Karen's camera phone peeked over the fence. I could practically hear her humming her victory anthem. She really thought she had me boxed in. Then the lead agent stopped dead in his tracks, turned, and his eyes widened. "Wait, Lane? As in Jonathan Lane's kid?" I smirked. "Yeah, that's my dad, CEO of Voltran Utilities, owns half the city's energy grid." The agent blinked. "I used to be on his detail. 10 years ago, tell him Rogers says hi." Karen's recording device visibly shook. "Wait," another agent cut in. "You're not the guy with the underground chem lab?" "Not unless you count my espresso machine." Rogers chuckled. "This guy's not a threat. Hell, he's probably safer than most people here. We'll still run the samples, but I doubt there's anything illegal going on." They turned to leave. Karen screamed across the street, "What? You're just gonna walk away? He's poisoning us." Rogers pointed at my posted signs. "Ma'am, he has clearly documented warnings, video evidence of you ignoring them, and a private property boundary you violated more times than I can count. You're lucky he hasn't pressed charges yet." Karen turned purple. "But the drones, the crystals, the infection." Another agent raised a brow. "You swam in it twice after being warned." "I was trying to cleanse the neighborhood." They got back into their SUVs. Rogers gave me a respectful nod and then added, loud enough for Karen to hear, "If you ever need anything, Lane, give me a call." The convoy rolled off. Karen's mouth flapped like a broken puppet. She tried to shout something, but all that came out was a strangled wheeze. Her followers slowly stepped away from her like she was radioactive herself. And me, I smiled, pulled out my phone, and called my lawyer. "Showtime," I said. The courthouse smelled like polished marble and desperation. Karen showed up in a beige skirt suit that looked like it was ironed with rage. Her lawyer, a local hack named Denny, who'd made his career suing dog groomers and mislabeling lawn disputes as grand larceny, walked beside her like he'd just been handed a nuclear bomb but forgot the manual. Meanwhile, I strolled in wearing a navy suit, no tie, and an expression carved from pure boredom. My attorney? A beast in heels named Valerie Cross. Harvard grad, sharp tongue. She once sued a country club so hard they had to rename the pool. Karen didn't even glance my way. She couldn't. Not with half the HOA sitting behind her like a jury of gossip-hungry vultures. Her bandages were off now, but the visible scratching and scarring around her neck and arms told the story. And yet she still walked in like she was Mother Teresa with a chlorine burn. The judge called us to order. Valerie stood up with a grace that made half the courtroom sit straighter. "Your Honor," she began, "we are here today not because of my client's actions, but because the plaintiff, Mrs. Karen Underwood, willfully trespassed on private property, repeatedly ignored posted warnings, defamed my client through baseless accusations, and orchestrated a neighborhood-wide smear campaign resulting in harassment, property damage, and the misuse of federal law enforcement resources. Karen's lawyer blinked like he'd just realized this thus wasn't small claims court. "She got an infection," he blurted, "from the lake." Valerie slid a stack of printed color photos across the table. Photos of posted warning signs, dated and time-stamped. Video evidence of Mrs. Underwood tearing said signs down. Drone footage, ironically hers, showing multiple illegal entries onto my client's land. And medical reports showing the lake contained nothing harmful unless ingested after prolonged exposure. Which, by the way, no sane person would do, unless they were trying to baptize themselves in algae. Karen stood up. "He's toxic. He's manipulating the ecosystem. He's rich and corrupt." The judge banged the gavel. "Sit down." Valerie continued like she was ordering dessert. "We are seeking damages for trespassing, libel, harassment, and mental anguish, including therapy costs. My client had to endure being called a chemical overlord and biological menace in public." Karen screeched, "Because he is." The judge sighed, took off his glasses, and looked directly at her. "Mrs. Underwood, I reviewed the footage. You swam in that lake like it was a water park. You ignored multiple warnings. You called in federal agents who found no wrongdoing, and now you're in here trying to sue him for your own mistake?" "I got sick." The judge didn't flinch. "So did the guy who ate a urinal cake once. He didn't sue the janitor." Laughter erupted in the courtroom. Valerie didn't even smirk. She just handed over the lawsuit total. 6 figures, not including interest. Karen's face melted like warm plastic. Her lawyer turned red. The HOA board behind her looked like they'd just been told Santa isn't real. "Final judgment, full compensation to me, a court-ordered public apology, and a restraining order that kept Karen 200 feet from my lake, my house, and my mailbox." She cried outside the courtroom. Real tears. Mascara streaming down onto her clipboard of failed plans. I walked past her slowly, leaned in, and whispered, "Next time, read the damn sign." I got back into my Range Rover, rolled down the windows, and drove past the HOA's clubhouse, where I had just paid off the manager to install a giant metal plaque that read, "Private lake, trespassers will be humiliated in court. The end. Please like and subscribe for more HOA showdowns like this." Do you think Karen got what she deserved? Comment below.